Guys, it's me. I'm back. What's up, party people? We're like, Mads, come on. All right, this show is taking a turn for the. Oh.
What's going on there, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Monster Bass Live. We got a great show for you. Sorry, guys, I can't hear. We got a great show for you today, and I'm kind of sad that Raphie's not here because we've got a marine biologist on the show, and I think if anyone could have benefited from that, it would have been Raphie. But nonetheless, we're going to move forward. I'm really excited to be here. You know, I feel so lucky to be a part of this community. Like, you know, Raphie as of late has been manning the marketing at Monster Bass inbox. And so I haven't had a chance to do that. And so I went through it today, and there's so many people that are submitting their PBs. And it really really makes me excited to think that because of what we're doing and the fact that we all come together as a community to help each other, it really makes me excited when I see all these PBs. And so, you know, we get together because we want to help you become better anglers. We want to help you catch your personal best and have more successful days on the water. And as always, we start the show by celebrating those. And so I'd like to celebrate a few people that have submitted some picks. So I'd first like to thank and congratulate this next person, Chris Banks, with a 13-pound, 5-ounce tank out of North Carolina. I mean, that thing's a beast. Look at it. Next up, we got Michael Cleary and Morgan, 5 pounds, 4 ounces out of New York, and on a Lunker Hunt thump spinner. Mason Hughes, with a 4-pound, 6-ounce beast in Oregon. And then Britton Phelps, 6 pounds, 7 ounces. Look at that beard. I mean, that beard, I'm not sure whether I should be acknowledging the catch or the beard. That's impressive. And then finally, RJ Diaz with a 12-pound, what is that? 12-pound, 10-ounce striper. Yeah, in Arizona. I don't know how that made the list, but hey, congratulations. Love the fact that you guys are catching PBs. We've got Bethany manning the chats today. Now, I don't know if, you know, she hasn't been in the chats in a while, but Bethany Rudd is in the chat, so make sure you're nice to her. Make sure you say hi, because she is one half of the dynamic duo that is our customer service team. And between she and Jennifer, they do a really great job. And anyone that tells me otherwise, I'm going to tell them that they're wrong. And I'm going to go to bat for them because they're great. Couple things we're going to cover before we get into today's show. We have started shipping via FedEx, and so your orders, I hope, will arrive faster to your door with tracking and picture-proof delivery. And if this doesn't work, I don't know what to tell you, right? Like, at the end of the day, we're doing the best that we can, and we picked FedEx, and we think they're the best, and so your packages are in their hands, and they're on their way to their door to you. Now, 2024 is a big push for us, and I wish Raphie was here so we could chat about it, but 2024 is a big push for us in terms of retail, and we need your help. We need your help because you love Monster Bass, you love the baits, and you're a part of the brand. And if you've got a favorite local tackle shop that you think would be a great place to carry our baits, here's what we'd love you to do. Contact Raphie at monsterbass.com. Give him the name of the shop. Give him some of the details. Maybe tell him who to talk to. And he'll get in touch with you. And if that shop ultimately ends up carrying our products, we're going to hook you up with $100. Raphie will take good care of you, and all we're looking for is an introduction, and he'll coach you on what we need to do. So thank you guys so much. And then last but not least, I did hear that Raphie socks were available. Can we bring in Chris? Because I'd like to talk about the Raphie socks. How's it going, man?
I'm good. You said Rafi wasn't here, but you know what? I knew he wasn't going to be here, but
Look at
we've
that.
got the Rafi socks. We've got Monster Bass on one side of each. We got the hidden logo back there. Your chance to take Rafi fishing is here. You can
He
hop
look
on the website. The website's available. They're there. He looks good, right? You're
he
gonna
kind
take
of
him.
looks like Agatha Spartacus from Birdcage. I'm not sure.
I, don't, I know we're gonna have to name it. A couple people last week in the chat because I had a sample. They're like, "Oh, he looks exactly like this person." So we'll sort through all of that. We'll probably give him a different name later. But yeah, Rafi socks are available. You can take Rafi fishing anywhere you go. Take him to work with you. Like I don't know, show and tell day. Take Rafi along. Whatever you got going on, that's between you and the socks and Rafi. So they're available.
I love that. I love that. And do we have a link up on the screen for everyone that perfect. So
I
you
think
just
it's
head over to fishsocksusa.com. Hook yourself up with some of those. I don't know.
And when proceeds, we're gonna do some proceeds that are gonna go to Monster Bass Cares, and it's gonna be a good time. So no, we love it.
Yeah, I'm really excited about today's show. I feel like I'm going to learn a lot. I'm really sad that Rafi's not here because we know he needs to learn a lot.
He needs to listen. Yeah, to buckle up is all I can tell people. The green room. You got to listen. I wouldn't stop just asking questions of our guest already because this guy, he's smart and he knows how to talk, not just as a scientist, but he delivers super intelligent information on a level that we can all understand it. I cannot wait.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for today's show, and other than the fact that I screwed up the entire opening because I bought these new headphones thinking that they'd be great, and all I could do was hear myself, I think we're off to a good start, and we're gonna have a great show. So, for everyone tuning in, thanks for taking time out of your day to be with us, and I'm gonna turn this over to Chris and let him introduce today's guest.
Yeah, I'll tell you. A while ago, I'll share. I live in a place where I'm so lucky to have this beautiful lake next door. It's a private facility, phenomenal bass. People catch fish that are over 10 pounds. But I noticed in like the last 8 years of living here that the fishing seems to be declining, and there's so many things that affect the fishery. And I had mentioned because I saw this guy and he's the aquatic biologist. I was like, I'm going to message him and just see if I can connect with him. And I said, I feel like, and I used the word feel. And I said, I feel like the fishing has changed. And he's like, hey, remove the feelings. Let's talk about facts. And that hit me so hard. I was like, wow, this is a whole way to understand fishing from a scientific level. He's like, what's the relative weight of your fish? I'm like, what are you talking about? Relative weight. So I went down this rabbit hole, and his name is Shan O'Gorman, the aquatic biologist. We're going to get him in here, but he's helped educate me to understand my personal fishery that's next door. He teaches you all about where fish live, the habitat, the life cycle of bass. He does pond management, small lake management. Wow. This guy, he's been on, I think 25 different podcasts, Tackle Talk like 5 times. This guy is a wealth of knowledge. And he said, I'm like, can you come on Monster Bass Live? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. I was like, done deal. So no more introduction really needed. This guy, I said, I did a little promo. He went to school and got a degree in fish. Like, let that sink in, right? Going to college. He's been a bass fisherman for over 40 years. He's right with us, Rick. He said, it's like this new technology. He's an old timer. He's turning 50 soon. So we're right there with this understanding of background of fishing. And he's here to just dispel the misinformation, dispel the myths. And we're going to touch on that, the whole catch and release, maybe where that came from. Are we indoctrinated? Is this like a religion we all bought into that we didn't know? Is this a cult? The catch and release cult? I like to tease a lot. So let's make this a little bit controversial, educational. Let's jump in. Let's see. Can we get Shan on here? Let's go for it.
Let's do
it. Welcome.
Gentlemen.
How are you?
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being on.
It's a good intro.
Well, I'm excited. I'd love to hear a little bit of a background. I know the story, but I want everyone to hear it. Tell us maybe about where you're from right now, getting into school, bass fishing. Take us down that journey a little bit to get some background before we get the phone lines open and get questions coming.
Okay, sure. Well, like you said in the intro, I've been bass fishing. I'm 50 years old and been bass fishing since the 70s, so it's been a long time. And went to school. Met a guy there that was a fisheries biologist, and I had never heard of such a thing. Had no idea that school really wasn't. I did okay, you know. It wasn't like straight A's or anything. I got by, but that really interested me, you know. So I was in South Georgia at the time, at a little college called Valdosta State, and I had to transfer to the University of Georgia to major in fisheries. They were the only program in the state, so I transferred up there and got in and learned pond management. And it's a professional core. It's a professional program, and what that means is, like, some people, you know, we also talked about in the green room a little bit about negativity online and stuff, and you know, there's a lot going on about like college boy and college doesn't give you everything you need, and you know, all that stuff that floats around. Well, this kind of college program is a little bit different than, you know, community school. This is like going to vet school or law school or a professional program. You learn to become a professional biologist in a school like this, or you learn to become a forestry school. So you could learn to become a professional forester. You know, how many trees are on that 5,000 acres, for example? You know, how much wood is there? How much money's there? That kind of thing. So it was a very hands-on program. Even though we were in college, we were in the field doing electrofishing surveys, working on people's ponds, writing management reports. It was all very hands-on.
Cool.
And from there, in the summer when I was at school, I would go be a lifeguard for this company. I just got hooked up. It was better than being a framer and get to chill out at the pool all day. And those neighborhood HOA ponds or pools had ponds for the company that I was working for as a lifeguard. They'd rotate me around 3 or 4 places. And so I started telling the presidents of the HOAs that I was already doing business with as a lifeguard that, hey, I can take care of that algae problem, or you got some trash in the pond, or, you know, you know what I mean? So I started picking up work immediately in the summer times on ponds. And that would have been around 1994. So once I graduated, I had enough going that I didn't have to get a job. I just worked for myself managing lakes. And I did that until 2012 when I sold the business. And so there's basically 2 types of clients that you have. You'll have like super like crazy rich, like, I don't know, you rock star people, you know, race car driver people like that might have a private lake you'll do work on. But most of your money comes from like apartment complexes and HOAs where the money is pooled, you know.
Yep.
And I managed several thousands of acres of water. I electrofished them for 15, 16 years in a row. I also subcontracted to other companies throughout the Southeast and ran my electrofishing boat, you know, for them. So I've run electrofishing surveys in 10 different states. I have over 1 million miles towing a trailer boat on my Chevrolet.
So I want to just jump in because I have so many directions. I'm so excited. One, how many people in the class? Because obviously you're in a university setting. There's different age groups and different people at different times of their career in the school. How many of them also fished like you? That's always the question I have, is like when I'm dealing with scientists and I'm talking to others, not all of them have a fishing background. I think that's a unique trait that you carry beyond the average scientist. Did a bunch of them fish, or were you one of the select few in this college program?
No, there was only a few of us that were fishermen, but I felt like all of us, once you go bust down and learn like every living thing in a lake, you become better.
Right.
You know.
And that's like I'm a better different way. I'm a different angler because of what I've learned from you. I understand fishing. I understand vertically integrating food sources from a shell cracker, eating clams and bringing those nutrients from the dirt up into the food chain for the bass. But the other question, I mean, I think it's notable that you have this history of fishing. Did you have any honey holes? Because you're talking about all these little ponds and private things. How many honey holes did you create that you had access to go back and fish? Can we just touch on that for a minute? Because it sounds like you had access to money, and if somebody wanted to grow trophy bass, did you do that a couple of times and you have some honey holes that you know about?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's probably enough said.
That's a
cool.
great question though, because we can lead into I can lead into that. I've taken new lakes and stocked them, right? And I've watched them fail. Like yours, fail is probably not the right word. I've watched them decline in the way
Sure.
that you described your lake. So I've watched, and I've run electrofishing surveys every single year, right? Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the average lifespan of a lake. You build it, and then what happens? Okay. What size lake would you like to use in this example? It doesn't matter to me. I've seen it. 10 acres, 20 acres.
And I go personal. I have a lake that I live at, and it's 230 acres. It was built 50 years ago. And so understanding, and this is like my timeline of knowing a lake, you put a dam up, and from that day you put the dam up, it's nature's timeline to turn that back into land. It's trying to fill in with sediment. Stuff's dying.
Yes.
It's that you've got all this brush pile, or you got stumps that you've harvested, and you have all this natural structure that the lake is now filled, and this is what is presented to the fish. And that habitat, talk about habitat degradation, and stuff's rotting and falling apart, and silt is filling in. And that is a lake that I would love to discuss. I mean, it doesn't have to be this selfish endeavor of me, but because of you, I've learned so much about understanding. I think part of it is people all around the nation, and I'll let you kind of pick whatever size lake. Our nation was built, and the reservoirs are built really back in like the New Deal era in the 30s. And we have lakes that are all around 100 years old, and we don't build a lot of new lakes anymore. So you really think of like the Mississippi watershed and all these great places that are these historically amazing fisheries. I think we need to recognize they have a lifespan, and what's a requirement to do something about maintaining it. So jump back in, because again, like I said, I can go so many different directions with this, but if you're talking about a lifespan of a lake, I think that's a new concept for most people. It's like, oh, the lake should last forever. Like we have Clear Lake. Clear Lake over here it's probably one of Clear Lake is arguably the oldest lake on the North American continent. Clear Lake and Mono Lake, people argue back and forth all the time. And the fishery at Clear Lake is phenomenal. It is definitely being affected by man and all these pesticides and herbicides and things that are going in it, chemically growing stuff around it that historically wasn't there. But majority of our lakes are man-made, or reservoirs that we have that are man-made. So dive into that whole timeline of a lake and the lifespan of a lake, because I want to learn.
Sure. I mean, I should have wrote down some notes. You made me so many points there, but
that's okay.
So the first misinformation kind of thing that comes along is online when you're doing this consulting on pond or lake management is like, you don't leave it to Mother Nature. You should leave it alone. Leave it to Mother Nature. But let's go back to what you just said. The minute the dam is impounded, okay, Mother Nature didn't impound that dam. Okay, you're not dealing with something that Mother Nature knows how to handle or manage. It's a man-made structure, and it requires man-made maintenance. It's a man-made stocking strategy for all these lakes. Okay, it's not Mother Nature that determined the best combinations of fish to put into your lake. Scientists did studies where they stock lakes with different combinations of fish almost 100 years ago now. Stocked them, let them go a couple years, drained them, and measured the fish to see the healthiest population combinations of species and things. So that has to do with the fish population balance. Okay. What's the number of predator species versus the number of prey species? And another disconnection is, if I went out and did electrofishing survey and told somebody, hey, you're light on forage, your bass you have too many bass and you don't have enough forage, so your bass aren't growing. Their first instinct is to want to stock more forage. But you don't want to be in that business against the largemouth bass. They'll eat you out of house and home. They consume way too much to try to eat. To try to stock with money, it's mathematically can't be done. You're wasting your money.
Can we dive into that for a second? I think that's a really important thing. And I've had my brain exploded a few times with this, is knowing a bass needs to eat 10 pounds to grow 1 pound. So understanding the amount of food they need to consume to grow. I recently read, and I want to make sure that this is correct before I share it, 5 pounds per pound of bass. So if you have a 1 pound bass, it needs to eat 5 pounds per year just to stay alive. And so
Correct.
if you consider a 10-pound bass needs to eat 50 pounds of forage to stay alive, and then we want it to grow another pound, that fish so choke this down. 1 pound fish, so we're talking about a 1 pound bass.
Right.
Every 1 pound bass to stay alive for the year, not to grow, not to get big or anything, that bass needs to eat 5 pounds. So I have a 1 pound bass, it eats 5 pounds, whether it's crawdad, bluegill, whatever.
That's to stay alive, not to grow.
That's to stay
that would
alive.
be a stunted bass. Yeah, that's a stunted bass at 5 pounds. At 10 pounds, you'll get 1 pound.
So Shan's like, I'm going to grow this little tiny 5-inch bass to 2 pounds in 1 year. Well, that bass now needs to eat 20 pounds of food plus the 5 pounds to stay alive. So you got a little bass that's eating 25 pounds of forage. And everyone's brain needs to just go, I have no idea where a bass is finding 25 pounds. And the reason I want to bring this up is,
this is good.
That's how much a bass needs to eat that much food. That's why we can catch them so often. They're eating machines. Go ahead, Rick's dying to say something.
Yeah, I'm dying to ask a question. Okay, but that math tells me, then why are we so focused on catch and release?
You shouldn't be.
Because it was a mark.
I can tell you exactly how it got there. So back
it's online.
Go ahead. 70s. Yeah, in the 70s, the tournament bass guys got going and they got real popular real fast. But in my opinion, their fish handling is still really poor. But their fish handling was terrible in the 70s, and they left a bunch of dead fish everywhere, and that was really bad PR for their tournaments. And people were saying, "No, you're not going to come here and kill all our fish." So
you're the reason we don't have fish.
Yeah,
I was going to say that
was born because of a PR issue with tournament fishing, not by a scientific study that say, hey, we need to remove some fish.
And I'll tell you, Rick, it's worse than Shan, you're doing a great job sharing it. It was literally Ray Scott watching a fly angler release a trout in a river and everyone cheered. And he would have these tournaments that he put on with bass and going around, and all these old timers at the lake are like, oh, you're the reason. They used to harvest 20 fish at weigh-in. You got to remember, these are boats that didn't have live wells. Then they went to 15 fish. Then they went to 10 fish. So it's really cool. I think it was 1967. I took a note. The winner was Pete Henson in 1969 of the Rebel Invitational. He has 124 pounds of bass on a stringer dead over his shoulders, standing next to the bass founder, Ray Scott, for the weigh-in to show that he was the best angler at that tournament. Then everyone's like, this is terrible. They're killing all of our fish. They're going to ruin our lakes. That's why I don't catch big fish. Well, these guys are just better at targeting big fish. They're the best anglers in the world at that time. So as a PR stunt to make it sound better, obviously rivers and different things have a lot. The fish, we can go into that. Like you mentioned something that Shan, that struck me. Nature and rivers and us damming them, and the company Patagonia that's trying to rip down all the dams. That's one concept of, like, I live in California, and we won't even get into who manages our waterways and what's gone on over here in Steelhead and Striper. That's for a whole nother discussion. But knowing we are bass anglers wanting to catch bass, we took this marketing piece of catch and release and those whole pendulums that the wildlife management in Texas, you go right onto their website. It says, have we taken catch and release too far? And I think that's this whole thing of, it's not every fishery, because some fisheries have the struggle of maybe their spawns are bad or maybe their water quality is bad and the fish don't live very long. But the majority of lakes, I think I'll just let you drop it. I think we may have too many fish in some of the lakes to see the bass that we all grow. Can I ask you this specific question? How do you manage when you go to a lake, knowing the catch rate is very important for a lot of people? So how do you make a lot of people happy to catch a lot of fish versus managing me that wants to catch fish at 5 pounds? Because I think this is this whole thing is understanding as a fisheries aquatic biologist, your job is so difficult to make everyone happy to have a lot of fish I think for me, I can answer. It's like, okay, I just want the fish to be healthy, whether they're small, medium size, or large. But share with us, what's that like when you're called into a job? Do you first assess what the goal is for the overall people, or do you focus on larger bass? Maybe answer that a little bit for us.
I was real lucky to I dealt with small bodies of water. I've managed probably half a dozen lakes, 250 acres, like about your size, but that was pretty big for me. Most of the stuff was small. And it's nice managing small stuff because you can actually see the results. 250 acres, you're going to have a hard time harvesting enough bass out of if that's what you needed to do. To touch on, I wanted to, before I lose my mind and go down to that question, I wanted to touch on that one thing when you were talking about a minute ago. We have 5 pounds of bass for the bass to stay alive, 10 pounds for it to grow a pound, 20 pounds for it to grow 2 pounds, right? But what we also have to remember on that math is carrying capacity, okay? And in Georgia, we only support in a pond that's not being boosted in any way, like by me, managing it to hold higher fish population. We only hold 100 pounds of fish per acre. All right. So put that into your brain that, yeah, bass need 25 pounds to grow those 2 pounds, but you've got a limited amount. You've got a limited supply of it as well.
Yeah, I want to make sure that people, when you drop the word boosted, I know you put in feeders and you're supplementing and you're boosting the pond's ability because it's not naturally generating that food. So I want to make sure people grasp that. And 100 pounds per acre, that's everything. That's whether it's the tiny fish,
Total.
whether it's shad, whether it's bluegill. It's this understanding of you got an aquarium at home and you got a 5-gallon aquarium that can only hold so many fish. Lakes are the exact same thing. There's only so many areas the fish live in anyway, and there's so many habitat structures that this is why I think this is so fun to have a person like you, because we can go down any rabbit hole, and I think I'm going to take you down too many to make sense of every bit. But I think we touched on this whole.
You want me to break the food chain down real quick?
No, I'd love it. So this is, bring some information, because I believe we're better anglers the more we know. And the education of a bass's food chain. Monster Bass brings baits to anglers every month. And we're talking about retail stores. We're going out as anglers trying to mimic that food chain. That's how we technically catch our bass. Sometimes we throw lures that just piss them off, and that's a whole different thing. But normally we're trying to match this hatch. So give us the food chain breakdown.
Okay. And it helps everyone once they learn it. It's a simple thing. We'll just use a simple 1 acre pond as an example. If I stocked a 1 acre pond in Georgia, and you stock it with bass and bluegill, and I'll try to tie everything we've talked about together into all this. Let me think real quick. All right. So, where does the food come from that the fish eat, right? Okay. So the base of the food chain is a microscopic algae called phytoplankton. And it lives floating around in the water all over. And I know everybody's seen the whales in the ocean that filter the plankton out of the water, same thing in fresh water. Okay. So the phytoplankton is the most important plant because it's food for zooplankton, the next step down in the food chain. So phyto is kind of, plant algae. Zooplankton is like animal algae. And
those are sea monkeys, right? Isn't that?
Yeah,
isn't
all
that
that
the sea monkeys?
Exactly.
Okay, all right. So I want people to put this.
Yeah,
I'm with you. So I went down this rabbit hole. So we've got sea monkeys now swimming around. They're eating this plant life phytoplankton. That's some people. There's algae's a little different, but imagine something growing in the water, and you've got a species. You got plants, and you got animals. Now? What eats it next?
Now all that's microscopic. No, well, zooplankton can be, you can see some zooplankton with like a hand lens, and zooplankton is 50% of a bluegill's diet. Okay. So do you see how that works right there? Just how quickly it goes to the bass? Right. Phytoplankton, zooplankton, 50% of the bluegill's diet right there is the density of the zooplankton. Okay.
Now, can I ask you, do tiny bass, when they're first, you got these fry, are they involved in eating phyto or zooplankton?
zooplankton is their main source of food until they get big enough to start eating bluegill fry.
All right, because I wanted to share it, but I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to give too much information because I don't want to give the wrong Fido zoo.
No, you nailed it.
I thought for sure that fry were eating that. Okay.
Yes, the bass.
So Rick, that's your Rick. You got a future bait, a tiny little zooplankton to catch tiny baby bass fry. Okay, so that's future monster bass bait. No, it's cool.
The first bait, go Google after you get off the pod. Go Google zooplankton and look at some of the forms of zooplankton, and look at how many forms of zooplankton look like creature baits.
They're all bugs. It's just, and that's this thing is fish know what they're eating on that level, that small, and then you grew it bigger. I know this. A lot of this comes from my fly fishing background and matching the hatch. Your creature baits, a lot of these new bugs that have come out, they are expanded, exploded sea monkeys. So keep going.
So next after that, we got aquatic insects, and they live on the bottom. Like some of the examples would be like dragonfly larvae. Dragonfly larvae are the predators. They're the worst ones of all of the insects in the bottom. There's probably several hundred different species. Oh, dragonfly larva is the top dog. It lives under the water for 3 years. It absolutely dominates everything. Just gnaws it. Just total predator. And then comes out, mates, flies around, lays eggs back down, and then, has its life and dies, has its life cycle, very similar to a stream, like a fly fisherman. The other 50% of a bluegill's diet are those aquatic insects. So half of it's in zooplankton, half of it's in insects. And then, then we have our bluegill. And in our 1 acre pond example, that's the only species of forage we want except for red ear. We want some bluegill and we want some red ear. And that's sort of the next place where guys always make a mistake. They want to stock their pond like the lake, but their pond's not a lake. Okay? We have limited space. We have 100 pounds of fish per acre, and if I put a feeder on it and feed her properly, now I have 400 pounds of fish per acre, but I'm still limited, right? I can't grow as many fish as I want. So I want the best forage that spawns the most babies in, and that's bluegill in ponds. For North America, the best forage you can have in a pond or small lake is bluegill because they spawn so many times. If you replace them with, say, golden shiner, you're taking, like, you got that 100 pounds of fish per acre, right? Let's say 30 of it's bass. All right, so we got 70 pounds of bluegill now, but somebody adds shiner. Say he adds 30 pounds of shiner. Well, you just made almost half of my forage base spawn only 1 time a season instead of 3 or 4 times a season like the bluegill. So by adding the shiner to my pond, I actually kind of reduce the productivity of the bass growth, not increase the productivity of the bass growth. And I've been doing this on my page live for about 2 years. I stocked a pond. I put the bass in 2022, and we track them live. And right now, 2023 fall, so I've had 2 growing seasons, and I've had several bass over 4 pounds in 2 years. They grow exceptionally well in new systems with bluegill only on a feeder. Like, I will grow you an absolute unit. That's all you have to do is just consistently feed your bluegill, and I will grow you a tank bass in no time. I'll have 6-7 pound bass next fall.
And that's this thing is like understanding the big bluegill. You want to grow them to the point where they can protect their nests. This is this important piece of having a bluegill that's going to spawn. Normally, I've heard that it's almost all the months that it's above 70 and below like 80, 85. I don't know when they cut out, and maybe Shan, you can help us. But having bluegill that grow big is really important to be able to protect them and let those bluegill get a little bigger and feed our bass better. So I think that's an important piece, is understanding how you're pumping these bluegill to help subsidize their feeding schedule, get them to grow bigger faster. And then that's going to help more spawn and more growth. You're not just going to the grocery store and buying more food for your bass. Nature's taking care of it. So can you touch on that? Like the red ear, I know they're not as prolific and they don't mate as often, spawn as often. Tell our listeners, the bluegill, how important that is for them, because the shell cracker idea, they do go down and they harvest. They seem to be eating something that your standard bluegill's not. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Right. And again, that goes back to the scientists discovered this years ago. It's like this combination of bluegill and shellcracker is the best in ponds because all ponds will have mussels and snails and things like that down on the bottom. And it's just that's another part of the food chain. We just didn't quite touch on it. And if you didn't stock shellcracker, you would have no access to that protein because that's why they get that name. They have pharyngeal teeth that crack open those snails and eat the snails and reduce the snail population. So it's doing two things for you there. Actually, three. They spawn earlier in the spring than bluegill, so you get a little forage pop from your shell from your red ear earlier. You get a little bit more forage earlier in the spring, and then reduction in snail population. But that's really important because that's also reduction in the parasite population that can get onto your fish because the parasites in fish, most of them are hosted on the snails through the snail's life cycle. So a reduction in the snail population is a reduction in the parasite population, which is a reduction in the stress on your bass because you don't want your bass to have a lot of sores and things like that from parasites. So it's really important to have those fish in there.
So I'll tie this in quickly for our listeners. That's also it's an audible action that a shellcracker is eating a snail. It's cracking it. It's making noise. The bass can hear that. So when you're picking a bait, and every time we're thinking, oh, it's just the crawdad noise. Oh, it's crawdads. It's pinchers clipping, whatever. If you use a bait that mimics a bait fish nosing down, and if you add a rattle, or a lot of times I'll even use, when I fish a Neko rig, I put a little, like instead of just a nail weight, sometimes I'll use a sheetrock screw or something that'll tick and bounce. That is that noise of that shell cracker cracking those shells, and that fish, they hear that, they recognize its food. That's another thing to key into. Understanding how a shell cracker eats helps us become a better angler.
And to touch on that is brilliant, really, the way you tied that together. You should do this for a living, man.
Yeah, I kind of am right now with you, so it's all good.
Think about bluegill too. Bluegill are eating those insects for a living in that detritus level at the bottom, so they're going to be nosing down as well. But it's going to be different noises being made, But no, that was really smart. I like that.
That's fun. No, it's, and I think this whole thing, like, it's so fun because off of the corner we have this chat going, and people are like, "Oh, I've never eaten a bass. I've never harvested a fish." I think maybe let's jump to that for a minute. I don't know about the phone lines. I think we probably have the phone lines open, and I think maybe some people want to call and ask questions. So, okay, so I don't really want to jump to that.
I've never managed a lake or pond that I considered to be good without harvesting some bass.
Okay, so that's I think let's dive into this for a minute and then maybe jump to some calls. How do we change? I'm going to call it the cult of bass fishing, the catch and release cult, whatever. I want to ruffle some feathers here. I caught a bass. I'm going back 5 years ago. I had gut hooked a bass about 3 pounds. And I called my buddy. I'm like, this fish is going to die. I've never eaten a bass. I don't know what it tastes like. I catch striped bass, which was one of the trophy room today. That's a cousin. So we got these striped bass. They're delicious. My buddy came and picked up the bass for me because I was fishing my local lake. He took it home. He actually cut it up. He fried it. He brought some fish out. It was delicious. I have to admit, I'm on Monster Bass Live. It wasn't a trophy. There's these slots, different ways to manage a fishery. Once we talk a little bit later in the show about relative weight, we've got to somehow get an educational piece back that it's okay to harvest a bass. And I'm probably going against the grain of everyone, unless you're in Georgia and you're catching spots and you're trying to protect the shoal bass or something. Like every tournament out there, they're like, we go catch all the spotted bass and we kill every one of them.
Really?
In California, if we say we're going to go catch a fish and keep it, we're terrorists out here. So not just in the bass fishing community, like we're literally terrorists. I don't think you're advocating taking brood stock big fish. We touch on genetics a little bit. I don't know where you cut off that line. We don't have to get into that conversation. How do we wrap our heads around as a community that we're not going to hell if we eat a bass? Like, what do we do?
Well, so that kind of like goes back to, how you perceive the lake. When I look at the lake, I look at like almost like a biological engine, or a garden, right? It's a group of components as an engine that come together that I have to bring all the components together, from water quality to fish population balance to habitat, right, to get it to function properly. But then it also can provide food, much like a garden, right? And that's a big reason why a lot of these ponds were built all over the country. That the government built the ponds in Georgia in the 40s and 50s for free, for erosion control and to provide food resources for people, right?
Yep.
So, that's important to understand. And I would really like to point out to everybody that I see a lot of shaming around keeping fish in general these days. I see a lot of shaming around keeping bass these days. It's illegal to keep a bass. It's necessary to keep a bass. And please remember, if those people are keeping fish, they're probably feeding their families. I live in Central Florida right now, and the guys fish. There's guys down there at the dam right now fishing, right? And they're putting them in a cooler. There's no releasing them down there on a Rodman Dam, right? And that's because they got kids to feed, right? So let's try to remember that. Not all of us were as lucky or as fortunate or whatever. And some people fish for food, and that's to me, that's really important. And I'm going to tie that back into ideas that I have on how to fix some of the problems that we have.
Yeah, I want to touch on that, because can I share our local club? Like we were talking about having some crappie, and not all of us want to catch and harvest and deal with crappie. I think this is one takeaway that I've already gotten from the show is work within your local area where you fish, set up a food distribution channel. If you're out fishing and you understand this whole thing about the amount of fish a lake needs, we all have a responsibility. If we go out and catch and release all the time, we're testing the relative weight. If the fish are kind of skinny, who's managing the water? I think there's a chance for us as anglers to come together and say, hey, I don't want to eat the bass, but I do know I need to harvest a certain amount at a certain slot level. Maybe we set up these food distribution opportunities. That was one cool thing about, like, I don't want to say like, oh, bass, Ray Scott, there's all these problems. They used to give the bass they caught to local food closets. That's what they did with the fish at the end of the tournaments, is they fed people. Is incredible. And so this chance for us of like thinking, oh, the government's going to take care of it. I know. I'll remind you, I live in California. It's Rick. You live here as well. Like the government's going to take care of bass fishing. Like, are we kidding ourselves right now? We have a hard enough time to have like potholes filled in on the road or whatever. But I think you're helping us understand it's our responsibility as anglers. If we want to catch fish, especially if we want to catch big fish, what do we need to do as anglers to make sure the big fish have an opportunity to grow? Going back to that, a 5-pound fish, it needs 25 pounds to stay alive, plus 10 more to get to 6 pounds. I got to make sure that bass has 35 pounds of food available for it to consume that year. And if there's too many mouths to feed, they're just never going to have enough food to get to it.
Yeah, when you brought up the scenario and related it to managing a fish tank, like that put it all into perspective for me, because as someone that's had fish tanks their entire life, like when you can only have so many of the apex predators in the tank, and you've got to have enough food in there, and depending on how the proportion of the fish in there, like they just won't grow. And so it's really interesting the way that you explain that. And so that makes a lot of sense.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah.
I never thought about it that way. And so like just catch and release all day long is not really helping to sustain the water.
It's like I said, I ran electrofishing surveys in 10 states, and I can assure you, because I measured, and that's, so one of the things I see, guys will hold up a real skinny bass, they'll call it spawned out, right? But they're usually doing it in like October. And it's like, that's not spawning stress. Okay. That's starvation.
Yeah.
Food. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lack of food.
Can you walk us down that? Cause I think it's important. Like right now is the time to go catch your trophy fish, like January, February. Yes. The smart, big old fish that say is 10 pounds might put on 2 pounds of egg weight. And this is a chance to catch a monster, because they're already starting to feed up. They know spawning season is coming. And when they lose that, this is this fun part. And I like, when you're answering this, I think, can you start to bring in your scale? You have this amazing tool that's a simple ruler. It's a relative weight scale. I think that's probably the most important piece. When you told me to remove my feelings, that's what I use to educate myself about the health of the bass. So spawned out is one of those deals where you can take a fish and you can put it on a tape measure and you can know how much that fish relatively should weigh. whether it's carrying egg weight or not, a spawned out fish should probably go back to pretty close to its healthy weight. Is that true? Can you guide us down that a little bit?
Yes, if it started at a healthy weight,
Well,
it'll go
exactly.
back.
And that's what perfect answer. Because I mean, you've seen like, oh, it's spawned out. It looks spawned out because it's starving, and that's why it's below its relative weight. It doesn't have
You
access to
won't.
enough food.
Yeah, you won't notice spawning. Spawning stress will look like loose skin around the belly. That super tapered, like reverse triangle bass where its mouth is the gape of its mouth, its body could fit back through its mouth. It's not a football. It's the opposite of a football, right?
Right.
Okay, that is what I'm talking about. That is a bass that's living in a population that's crowded. And it's either crowded with other bass, or it could be crowded with many other predators that are affecting the forage. That it could be crappie. In a pond, you don't want crappie in ponds. Crappie can make all your bass look like that. Can get rid of your bass population completely, actually. I've seen it happen. But math, okay, it's just simple math, okay? And I guess the easiest way to explain it to somebody who's never seen relative weight, it's like a report card if you understand how to do the math calculation. So what we're going to do is it's like just like A, B, C, D, right? Like on your report card. It's a little bit different, and you can get an A++ on standard weight too. And I'll use the pond as an example, or we can use your lake as an example too. Sure. Did you calculate any relative weights on
a lot? I did a bunch, and it's really interesting. From 80% up to like 92, 95. I found a couple larger fish, and this is the thing that I geeked out on this. The bigger fish that are above 5 pounds have seemed to adapt to finding their own food. They've done better, basically evolving into what the lake has presented. But the fish that I'm really focused on are these 11, 12, 13-inch fish. They're below relative weight. They're the ones that there's just so many of them. I think they're all struggling to find that food. And I'm not doing my job. I'm not harvesting. If California says you can keep 5 fish, in our local area, they're like, they only want us to keep 2. I don't keep my 2 fish per day. I'm not doing anything to help the fishery other than saying, because of you, I'm no longer feeling the fish are suffering. I know scientifically they're below relative weight.
Right. Okay, so let's touch on that. You nailed it. I can run off that. Okay, this is the little chart that I've designed. The one that you get in school that does say largemouth, doesn't it? Okay, yeah,
it does.
Yeah. So, this is a standard weight chart for largemouth bass. Basically, what it tells you is across the top is inches, and across the bottom is pounds to the 10th. So, if we look at, say, a 12.5-inch bass should weigh 1 pound. You see how I got there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, okay. So using that, I'm just doing that to show you how to use the scale. You can kind of guesstimate when the fish are a little bit longer than the exact numbers. And then I'm going to use that 1 pound mark as because it's easy math. So for everybody, what he just described, his 12-inch fish, or his 12.5-inch fish that should be 1 pound is weighing 0.9 pounds. And that's what makes it 90% relative weight. We divide that out. You see the simple math to get the 90%? Okay. So in my pond, okay, at Sugar Hill, it's this hand. Go this way. It's clocked in reverse. Sorry. And on a delay. All right. So in my pond right now, we've caught 3 bass this fall that were at 16 to a little over 17, high 16 to 17 inches. And the 3 bass were 3.8, 3.9, and 4.1 pounds. Okay. So you can see in a balance situation, in a football where the balance is good and the bass are growing well, they can be significantly higher than these weights. Right. We also have to remember that there's some bias in this because we're feeding these bass fed bluegill. So these fish on this chart came from public water, and we have to understand that bias that our 145% relative weight fish in the pond would probably be more like 115, 120% if it wasn't for the feeder. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah. Can you give us some background? I went even further because I found there's about 4 different quickly accessible relative weight scales online. One's from Georgia, one's from Texas. They're all so close in the length and weight. Which one do you use, and give us an idea of how those relative weight scales were developed?
They were developed years ago in things like the 50s, if I remember properly. Back in a time when people actually kept bass, when the distribution of bass wouldn't look like that now. They would look way skinnier than that now. So there's proof right there that when bass were being harvested, they were healthier years ago. Go look back in the 70s and the 60s when people kept bass. Look at the stringers they caught.
Yeah, the bellies are always bigger than the mouth. The mouth, we always think of largemouth bass, and if you draw a bass, its belly should still be bigger than its mouth. You talk about stunted bass and how big. Yeah, and you hardly see that now. And I look at the pictures of my wife and myself holding up fish from our local lake. The really healthy, bigger ones have the bigger bellies, but all the small ones, the mouth is the biggest spot, and that's indicative of a stunted fish. So I think that's important to recognize. So having these. So I want to make sure that the people know. How can people find that? I think they can buy that lure, that ruler from you.
Yeah, it's the shop right now is just one place. I'm not monetized on YouTube yet. I'm getting close though. I'm really close, but so it'll be there eventually.
What's your website? How do we get people to? Okay, so they go to Instagram.
Instagram.
So they go to Instagram. They see you.
Biologist.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So people listening that are not seeing our screen, we got Shan O'Gorman here at the Aquatic Biologist on Instagram. You can go to his website. He's got this relative weight ruler you can purchase. It's so easy to have that on the deck of your boat, your kayak, whatever, and just be able to get a sense of how healthy the fishery is and what you're catching. And I always tie this into, I like to know more about the fish I'm trying to catch. Are they hungry? Are they starving? Are they roving? I've learned a lot about randomized fish, and the bigger fish, we call them wolf packs in different lakes, and they're displaced from their homes, whether you've sprayed the aquatic vegetation and now they have no cover. They're searching for food. They're moving around the lake. So they're chasing bait balls out in the middle. I think all these things, understanding the fishery and understanding the health of the fish definitely helps me as an angler catch more fish. So I think those are important, but having this scale. So now take me through this process. I go fish at a lake. I'm catching some fish. I'm putting in the relative weight. At what point do you get nervous? Is it like anything below 100%, or is 85 acceptable to be 85% relative weight? Okay. What's your breaking?
93. 93 is in below, or it's a 90, 100% is it's 100%. It's not like 100% on your grades on your report card. That's higher. It's actually higher than 100 on your report card. You know what I mean? Be doing better than 100% report card grade. A 93 would be the point at which I consider still acceptable if I'm managing your lake.
No, I think it's your report card. I think having like 93 is still an A, and then you get to like 97, you got like A plus. So you're at 100%, like you're A plus spot on. I think your report card analogy is perfect. So 93 is like, you might be getting to a B plus. Your fishery's still okay at 93, but you might consider getting a tutor and doing something to manage your fishery. So I think
let's use your lake. I like using real world examples of what you just said about your lake. So you use your data. We've got some 85, 90% relative weight fish, right? Okay. Yeah. That's enough information for me to start drawing conclusions, actually. And you saw some 5-pounders that were heavier, right?
Okay. And let me give you 2 little bits of information that are really biased, but I'm going to set it up, and I'm not going to tell you my opinion. It's a 50-year-old reservoir. I've dove to the bottom quite a bit with scuba gear, checked things out. It's silting in different levels. They try to manage things using chemicals. They did NT Max, where they tried to put in an enzyme to break down the mud. There's a lot of different things that have happened. Every year, they also, in the last 5-6 years, they've introduced 2,000 pounds of triploid rainbow trout to have kids be able to catch trout. And so again, you're talking predators and predator species and understanding carrying capacity. give me your, this is a professional opinion of a fishery like that. Give me your idea of, it sounds like you're already coming to some conclusions. What would you offer?
I've seen this about 100 times. 100 is exaggeration, maybe 80. Okay, so your lake is showing me. All right, and let's tie this back to our professional bass fishermen, because if they had a board, right, and they wouldn't have to calculate relative weight on all the fish they caught, but I would like to see them calculate maybe 5 or 10 fish per inch in every size class they catch at the lake during their fishing tournaments, and post those relative weights on a board, right? Just like you looked at it, because that's how you have to do it. You have to do the calculation, and you have to write it down on a piece of paper, and you have to see it, right? That's how you'll see it. And what you just described is exactly what we'll just use your example. So you saw 11 to 14 inch bass, which when I pull my thing up here, there's a reason why I made those numbers red. Those are usually your problem. Those are usually the problem, right? Okay, so your 11 to 14s are small and skinny, but the bigger fish aren't. That gives me a lot of information. One, your 11 to 14s have competition, more competition than your 5s. So the trout are competing with them, the crappie are competing with them, any other predatory species you've got in there are competing with those 11 to 14s, and they've got them stuck. The bass that are lucky enough to get enough forage to get past that point now have plenty, and their relative weight goes up because you got all the forage, plus they can eat the other bass.
Right. That's good.
So that's where it is.
And I think the only way you can deal with
over.
Right. So as an angler, my responsibility is to understand, bring education to a fishing club, discuss this whole taboo topic of catch and eat a bass. We have to get past this point of selective harvest. There's a reason reduced competition is important to understand. I think we're ready for some callers, Rick, but yeah. I mean, you're bringing so much information to the fishing world, and I always want to tie it back into helping us catch more fish. And I think this is an important piece, is harvesting bass and keeping bass is an important piece to make sure we have future trophy bass. And I think that as anglers, we all want these big fish and these PBs. We're recognizing people. There's a reason that fish are having struggles getting past that 11 to 14 inch. And it quite often is too many bass. So go ahead, Rick.
All right,
let's do it.
Let's take some calls. Every caller gets a spin of the wheel. Hey, thanks for waiting. Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, this is Daniel Pierce. I've got a couple of questions for Shane, if that's all right.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first question, thinking about the lateral line in the bass, when the receptors for the lateral line pick up that movement and relay that to the integration, is it triggering a voluntary response or an involuntary response for that fish to go after the prey?
Voluntary. They don't, how do I put it? It's going to be about twice the length of the fish that the lateral line will work, right? So if you got a 12-inch fish, maybe 2 feet away, it can feel motion in the water. And let's clarify what a lateral line is in case we got some beginners or some people who don't understand exactly what that means. There's a row of cells that go, like if this is a fish, right down the middle of the fish, from head to toe or head to tail, tiny specialized pores that I guess kind of look like a coffee cup with a hair in the middle is the best way to describe it. And that hair can sense water movements, really sensitive. Think like bat radar sensitive. They can feel like fish swim past and the water moving that the fish moved with its tail for minutes after the fish swam past because of the disruption in the water. So I'm talking about an organ that is super, super sensitive to its environment. In fact, it's so sensitive that if the bass is blind, it can still eat. It knows exactly where the prey is around it. It doesn't even have to have eyes. So a lateral line system is I guess the best way to kind of visualize it, like you go down to the beach, and, the kids are playing a radio too loud, like one of those big speakered radios, and it goes by and bumping, and you can feel the sound. To me, that's kind of how I visualize how that lateral line system works. They can feel what's around them if it's close enough. If it gets too far away, they can't feel it. But if it's close enough, it's doomed. Like, so they know it's there, right? It's a completely voluntary response. But when you start getting into things like jerkbait fishing and reflex action fishing, okay, now you're talking about reaction strikes, okay, or making them bite, as sometimes you'll hear them say. Yes, you can. What that means is, again, for anybody who's kind of new, you ever play with a cat? Like a cat's laying there chilling, sleeping, not doing anything. You grab the little feather on a stick and flick it in front of it. The cat, most of the time, will jump and grab it. You can create a reaction strike in a bass the same way. It works real good this time of year with jerk baits in the winter. You pop those jerk baits around them and they'll slap. You'll hook them on the side of the head because they just slap at it, not even really eating it. They're just being aggressive, being reactionary to it.
So Shan, you just made one of our guys so happy. You just referenced bass being like cats. Jeremy is going to be so excited fishing a Lone Star. He was on the show a while ago with us, and he's talking about, and it's truly that teasing of the fish. And I think having that understanding of lateral line is awesome with the caller, asking that question. I think you just touched it's like they have this voluntary idea. I think sometimes, like when a fish is sitting there, and I relate it to punch fishing. If you punch in that cover and that bait drops down super fast, that fish, It's all happened so fast. Their natural response, you force the fish to eat something. It just has to open its mouth. It doesn't have the time to make a decision. So I think it works both ways in those situations. So I think it's kind of neat that if it's voluntary and at a certain point it makes a transition, the bass has no other option but to open its mouth. You force fed it. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I think the caller has, you have one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, can I throw one more at you?
Go for it.
Yeah. So you did a awesome job of like running through the food chain, and obviously like every piece of that's going to have its role. And you talked about how like the bluegill plays such a role because it has so many more opportunities for the spawn. If you have all fish created equal in number of spawns, so if the bluegills spawning as frequently as like the red ear, what would you say is like the ketone species? Like if you remove it from the food chain, everything else just completely falls apart.
All of this goes together. It's called a symbiotic relationship. One can't exist without the other. If you stock bluegill with no bass, the bluegill will spawn and spawn and spawn and spawn, but there's nothing to control their numbers. So they'll stunt and die, and they'll get a huge crash in the population. And then the population, since the population's gone, you'll get a rebound in the zooplankton and the aquatic insects, which will then create the exact same thing over again. It'll as that stuff comes back, since the fish died, the other stuff comes back. The other stuff comes back, the fish come back, the fish die again. That's called a boom bust system.
Yeah,
and
that's cool. He's bringing so much information. Shan, you're crushing the information. That boom bust, that's the diversity of Forage, all these understanding pieces. You're dropping this information and tell us more about the boom bust, because I think that's an important thing. We all get mad or sad, and I'm like, oh, my lake isn't fishing as good. We're probably on these cycles that are in these boom bust. At a certain point, you have too many bass, they're going to probably get overpopulated. They're going to not have the resources to fight off infections. They're probably going to get sick. They're probably going to die off. And these are the things. Explain a little bit of the boom bust.
Okay. In the, like at your lake, 250 or so, you'll start seeing those natural cycles where it seems to me, just based on my experience, when you get smaller than that, the lakes just get plain stuck. They don't cycle. They might get stuck good, but most of the time they're kind of stuck cruddy at that 80-85% relative weight in your bass. Too many crappie, not enough bluegill, just kind of in this rut of a place. And that's where most of them are at. But they're balanced fisheries. The fish aren't dying, right?
Yeah.
They're just slightly below average. or average, but people don't pay me to grow average fish, right?
Right.
Because again, I'm in a unique situation in that I can control. I wanted to say one thing to you about your 250 acre lake and a 5 fish limit. Okay, you're behind an 8 ball big time, because if you are bass crowded in your 11 to 14s, you're going to need to remove 5,000 bass out of that lake this year.
Yeah, well, we've also made it as a homeowner association. We can only keep 2, so they've reduced it and they've made they compound it. So I think to make sure the caller feels happy, understanding that diversity of forage, he was looking for the answer of like, what's the keystone forage that you could. I think bass regionally, and I don't know, like smallmouth, largemouth, Georgia versus California. We've got a lot of crawdads. Someplace it's really crawdads heavy. You've got shad over here. We got a lot of bluegill, the Delta. There's so many. You got threadfin shad. We have all these different species that bass can eat. I think one thing to really take away is bass eat almost everything. They eat each other. I mean, literally,
Oh
you've
yeah.
got these. My favorite jerk bait is a baby bass. It looks like a bass, and you've got, and it's like, oh my gosh, you really think about this carnivore, terrible fish that just eat everything. That's why they're so fun to catch, because they will eat almost anything you put in front of them. So I think that's hopefully the caller. Did that answer your question, caller? Just the diversity of forage, I think, is super important.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to have them together.
Yeah,
one without the other doesn't work.
It's awesome.
Got it. All right, caller, should we spin the wheel?
Let's do this. Yeah, we got to give away some stuff.
Yeah, let's do it.
Do it.
Are there new Raphie socks on there? Can we give them some Raphie socks? Is that?
I mean, this says fix shotgun of beer.
Oh, all right, that's our producer
go get a beer
behind the
from the
scenes.
fridge while we do this. Thanks a lot, caller.
All right, that's awesome.
All right, while we're waiting for Fix to go get a beer and shotgun one, I mean, I don't make this stuff up. Let's get the COVID kid on the line.
COVID kid, I love it.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello, Marty. How you feeling?
Hey, how you doing?
I guess
I'm hanging in there.
I guess that's a dumb question.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Hey, so I got a question, Shan. I have a debate going with a buddy of mine. A couple years back, my local reservoir was getting inundated with a lot of grass, or aquatic vegetation, and they dumped in, a whole lot of grass carp based on the acreage of the lake and not necessarily the acreage of the vegetation. So what has happened is these grass carp have just devastated the vegetation. And then this past year, the water was down 18 feet. So that also killed off a ton of the vegetation. How do you feel about, when fisheries turn around and put in something like grass carp to help, curb the vegetation growth? Do you think that's going to hurt our bass population, as far as the food chain is concerned? Because, you're getting rid of the grass. And I just think that has a ripple effect. Not only does it take away the hiding place for a lot of the bass to do their ambush tactics, but, we're just, the debate, I want you to see if you can help me solve this debate. Because my buddy says, the bass are still there. And I'm like, well, they might be there, but they're going to start dying off because that whole food chain is going to be interrupted by these grass carp eating all the vegetation. Do you agree with that?
No. And I can break it down why.
Okay.
All right. See, I love it. Yeah.
All right. So there's a lot of misinformation on the internet around aquatic vegetation. So it's really not your fault that, you kind of think this way, because it's been talked about this way forever. But I've got grass carp in a little pond that I mentioned. I just grew a 4-pound bass in 2 years. I've got a heavy load of grass carp in there because it's an irrigation pond for a commercial facility as well. And I can't have vegetation or algae clogging the pump, right? Because its primary source is irrigation. Its secondary source is my little genetics survey with, and growing bass and with Florida bass and that. But okay, so the part about aquatic vegetation that guys don't understand is that aquatic vegetation is taking nutrients out of the water. That same nutrients is what the phytoplankton uses. So as the aquatic plant population increases, it decreases the phytoplankton population. Therefore, it decreases the base of the food chain. Therefore, it decreases all the fish in the lake. So I don't care how good the habitat and the root systems are on those plants. You have less fish in the lake because of those plants. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And if you go past 30% total coverage of the lake, that aquatic plant population will start killing your fish population due to biological oxygen demand. There's too many alive things in the lake at night, and those plants will kill every fish in the lake if you let them go. So that's why they put those grass carp in there, was to save your fish population, not to destroy it. If they let those plants go, and they did not stock that kind of money in grass carp for no reason. So they had to save the lake from the plants, is what they did, is what it sounds like to me.
Shan, I want to add in.
Yeah,
I think
all right.
that's with the caller. Can I add? We've got this vegetation at 25 to 30%. In California, we're like, grass is so important, and we spray the lake here as well with chemicals because they use the water for the golf course. They bring in like 1 million gallons a day from the river. It's an incredible transition from this healthy fishery. And when I say that we're jaded, we're talking about the fishing in a barely a decline. But I think that's important. Understanding grass versus habitat. As an angler, we want to fish, and I know punching in the grass, all these different terms, grass lines, weed beds, where we catch a lot of our fish, where the baits shine. What type of habitat are you thinking is the best? Talking in our minds about habitat restoration as anglers, how would you help us understand what should we be doing to our local lakes to make more habitat to catch better fish?
All right. So here's a part where things really get crazy, kind of confusing. Because let's take my new pond as an example. My fish are growing 2 pounds per year and they're doing great, and I've done that many times. But if I don't do anything, if I stock that lake and I let it go and I don't manage it, and that's usually what happens, I've seen this a lot of times, that'll change. And it'll be about 5 years. And it'll start stunning. The bass will start thinning down. They'll start crowding, right? Absolutely no part of the habitat that I installed that we put in gravel beds, we put in brush piles, we put in stumps, we put in habitat that can't grow over the pond and cause the problems I described with the aquatic weed problems cause, right? I've got lots of habitat, it can't grow over my pond and destroy it. Okay, that's the difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually, I get it.
Yeah.
Caller, go ahead, caller, because I think you got a couple of.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and I never thought about it that way. You know, just as a bass fisherman, I thought that, you know, as it is a reservoir, there's no dock, there's no real structure in this lake except for the weeds. So my first thought is, well, okay, the weeds are going away, so there goes the bass habitat. But obviously, the bass will find other places to hang out.
They will.
My only other question is this.
Oh, sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
You want me to go? Okay. So what happens when the lakes get real weedy, right? And all right, let's use a pond as an example, then we'll go to the lake. When my ponds get real weedy, what happens is it's a disruption in the fish population as well, because the bass can't hunt anymore. So they starve. When the weeds get too dense, the bass can't hunt in them. Or it can go the other way on you, depending on the weed problem. Only the bass fry can hunt real well because there's a little bit of space in there. So you get too many bass fry hatching out in there and dominating, just eating everything that hatches because they're all 3 inches long. And then you go clean up the weed problem, and then those 3-inch fish grow to about 9 inches and stunt like crazy. And it's because the weeds did it, not the fish population. And it's kind of what I'm going back to with that example. I can watch a fish population change with perfect habitat that I installed and changed in 5 years from a good pond to a bad pond. And that's because of the fish population balance, the numbers of bass versus the numbers of bluegill or other forage species. There's been a change, or there's been an introduction of a bad fish. Like in my pond, a crappie would be a bad fish. A green sunfish would be a bad fish. Something's come in there and begin to take away the forage from my bass, or my bass have gotten crowded and I've got to get a few out, right? In a lake, it changes though. Because usually, there's usually enough deep area of the lake that the weeds won't crush and kill the whole lake. But what it has done is it's squeezed hundreds of acres of water out. All that shallow water where the weeds are choking it, it's created this edge where there's bass are right on that edge. It's a simple, easy place to find them every time. And when the grass carp go in there and remove that edge, now the bass have moved all over the place and moved to different habitat because you've just completely changed the structure. All right. But you haven't changed the actual fish population. There's a big difference there. Okay. And I see guys do this all the time in my ponds. I go out, hey, your bass is stunted. You need to get some out. You don't have enough forage. Do they go harvest them? No, they do not. You know what they do? They go cut down trees and they sink brush piles and they put all this habitat in. They call me and they're all so proud. And I said, your fish population is off. It can't grow. No matter how many sticks you stick in the mud, those fish ain't growing until you adjust that fish population out. Then you can worry about habitat. Habitat's a secondary thing to a fish population. If I go and do electrofishing survey and I see really poor relative weights, there's a problem in the fish population, not the habitat. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay. So my last question is, I'd like to get your thoughts. I live in Virginia, and where we have the snakehead population going on. A lot of them in the Potomac River. We have them in the Rappahannock River, and now we're starting to get them into some of our reservoirs here. Do you think something like the snakehead can also affect the bass population?
Yes. There's only a limited number of fish. There's 100 pounds of fish per acre in Georgia, so we'll just stick with that. If you've got 4 10-pound snakeheads at 40 pounds, you've got 60 pounds of other fish left. That's how that works per acre.
All right. That sounds good to me. Away. Thank you very much. Very informative.
Sure. Another way to look at it, every 6 pound or 5 pound or whatever, however many pound snakehead is replacing that size bass.
Oh, it's a good way to look at it.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, Marty,
cool.
we're going to spin the wheel before we let you.
Wheel.
Sure.
Oh, for Jiminy Christmas.
Is there a limit to how many beers that Fix can shotgun, or we just keep doing?
Oh my God, Marty! You want a fishing rod?
All right.
It's a 2-piece bamboo, and it comes with a year's supply of turtle wax. You can hit me up tomorrow or when you're feeling better, and we'll figure out what to do.
All right, cool. Sounds good.
All right, feel better,
thanks,
Marty.
Guys, appreciate it.
All right.
All right,
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Wow. All right, let's go. These guys have been waiting 32 minutes.
Oh, let's get them rolling.
Wow. Dedicated.
Go ahead, caller.
Hello. Hey, thanks for having me on. Shan, great information. I've got 1,000 questions, but I'm going to be very limited here.
Yeah.
Hey, wait. Is this John?
This is John. Yes.
So Rick, this is our guest for next week, and this is a buddy of mine. So John's calling in, Shan. He makes this really big bait. We got to get you one. It's a donkey slayer. So I wanted to set up who's calling. He's the guy that manages the lake down by the ocean. So go ahead, John.
Okay.
Yeah, and I could talk to Shan all day long, but I just want to cut to the chase. Ever since I started bass fishing, particularly I'm in California, fishing on the California Delta mostly, guys will catch fish and be like, oh, this is a Florida strain bass. Oh, this is a northern strain bass. Is it visually possible to differentiate between a northern and a Florida, or is that something that has to be done through genetic studies and so forth? What's your take on that?
B, genetic studies. You can't look at it and tell. Or you could call it BS when they hold it up and call it a Florida and Northern and start bragging.
I'm so glad, Shan. Thanks for answering that, Shan, the way you did, because John and I have talked about this a little bit, and it's so great that you're calling John. Everyone's like, "Oh, look at that Northern, look at that Florida," and I'm always like, I can barely decipher male or female, rounded jaw, pointy jaw. Like the fact that you're a scientist just by glancing at a fish. Keep going, John, because this is bass gold.
No, I mean I could ask him. Okay, so let's say this is great that you're an angler, Shan, and you're a biologist. Okay. And I want it to be more factual based on biology, not from an angling point of view. Colors. Let's talk colors. And I thought I read this years ago from Berkeley. Is it true that silver and black on a bait is probably the most proven color in bass fishing? If you're going to go into a situation blind, you go to a body of water, you've never been there, you reach into the Monster Bass goodies bag, and you're like, God, what color? What from biology, not good old boy opinion. Mm-hmm. What is the proven color that bass really relate to? If I'm making sense here.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to try to explain something really complex, physics and stuff, and there's so many variables here with depth and water clarity, right? So let's just try to keep it a simple, example with color, because again, as you get deeper, light penetration changes, colors change. There's a lot of factors that go on with colors, but I'm not a real big color guy unless I'm in a high pressure place. You don't really worry about colors in low pressure fishing in ponds, right? The color really seems to me, in my experience, to come out in where the fishing pressure's ratcheted up, I'm not sure why that is. That's just that's not science. That's just my general observation. But the science part of this is what they taught us. Okay. Let's say we've got a nice green pond from a phytoplankton bloom, right, that I'm managing. Okay. So we got good phytoplankton density, and we got green water as a result, because what we're looking at is just billions and billions of tiny little plants floating around in the water that creates that green color. Okay, what is the most visible color in that water? So let's bust down how our eyes work. If we're looking at the water, right, every single color except for green is being absorbed by that water. And green is being reflected back, comes into our eye, goes into our brain, does all that, and our brain says, hey, that's green water, right? So since the most reflective color is green, the most visible color in green water is some shade of green. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does, because is it safe to say as bass anglers we put too much emphasis on color? Because I'm a bait maker, and I get crazy requests for colors, and I kind of like, wow, is this a bunch of hoopla? I mean, or how far do you take it, I guess, is my question. Again, I don't want the angling point of view. I really want biology to kind of take precedence over the argument.
Well, and I was reading on Monster Bass, man, how they got it set up to where it's almost like regional boxes, right? Where the colors of the baits, like if they're sending them down here, they're probably sending like tannic water stuff, so like black baits or darker baits or whatever. And you go to clear water, you need chrome and white. All those things are true, like I think that's a really smart way to do it, like on a regional level. Like I could see, as a bait maker, I could see you having the same bait, but instead of it being a white color or a black color, you call it tannic. You call it Highland Reservoir.
Right.
You call it, right. You know what I mean? You call it stained color, whatever color you want to know.
Yeah, that's a great.
It's a lure, for a
that's great
specific
info.
condition. Yeah, a lure for a specific condition is really where I see this going to. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, that's very interesting that you put it that way because you don't see that much.
Yeah, John, I was gonna reference John and I fish together a lot. We do tournaments down the Delta, and John knows if I'm throwing plastic in any kind of water with visibility, I'm throwing green pumpkin, and if I'm throwing a moving bait, it's almost always a white color. That's just what I've done. If it's really, really staining dark, I might try something a little darker, maybe a black and blue or whatever. But I'm that guy that just plays into the natural idea, diving and swimming and using filters. John's also a photographer. He's an instructor at colleges and things. So he gets the whole light spectrum and how that works. And so it's kind of fun talking with people. That green pumpkin, basic nature understanding of fish, that red drops out first when you get underwater. Having something to present. I think we get distracted sometimes with nature and seeing these bright colored fish that have evolved for specific reasons, and whether they've evolved to keep like thinking of ducks and the mallards and how they have bright colors on the males. We need more females to keep that species alive, and understanding all of these different things is how they've hidden. Sending a green bait into the water, you're going to catch a lot of fish, because a lot of fish underwater, the fish can see that bait. I think that's really specific to give that answer. I think John kind of touched on I think one thing to remember, the color isn't normally going to keep you from catching fish though as well. So if you have a bait that's a certain color, I've not seen it where like that's the determining factor to not find fish, because color does fall away, especially at depth. Because you have a favorite color, don't be afraid to try a fun color that you fish with more confidence, because whether the fish even see that color at all at the depth the fish are at, don't let that dictate why it won't work before you try it. So I think that's one thing to remember as an angler.
One thing that comes to mind while we're talking about
that's a good point.
Crawfish colors. You know how some lakes are stained and they're always muddy, right? And there's very little plant vegetation. And then some lakes are clearer and it has vegetation. All right, so let's use that for our crawfish, because that'll change their color. In the lakes that are muddy, the crawfish won't be grazing on any plant material, because there's the dirty water limits the light penetration, so the plants can't grow. Right. So a muddy pond or a muddy lake will have fewer fish per acre, because it's suppressed the phytoplankton bloom. But again, it doesn't mean it can't produce big fish if the fish population balance is correct. But those crawfish, as they emerge and start scraping in those muddy ponds, don't have much plant material. So it'll keep them blue-black. But in the clearer water where they pick up the plant material and start getting the vitamin A, it'll shift them to green pumpkin. So I remember that clear versus... Yeah, because what their diet will change their colors, especially in crawfish. And crawfish are a multitude of colors, though. They won't be, you can try, I would recommend trying many different colors of crawfish, but what I just said, that generally there, I generally start green in clear water and blue, black, and stained for that reason.
That's monster. Hey, Rick, take note. That's color patterns of the soft plastics for the monster bass trailers. That's the key, is like we've got these baits that we're working on in soft plastics. You're giving scientific reasons. When you see grass in a lake, you specifically should choose a color of a trailer or a crawdad that is specifically matching the water that you're fishing. So that's really important.
It's good information.
Yeah. It helps.
Very.
All right.
Well, thank you again, Chad. I appreciate it. And looking forward for next week, guys.
Well, you should be looking forward to spinning the wheel.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I'm so excited. Oh, you won a pair of Raphie socks.
No, that's incredible.
Where can we buy these Raphie socks again? Can we put that up on the screen?
So I'll tell you what, I was going to say, I got an update here. Raphie socks. We hand print these over fish socks. That's what we do. So fishsocksusa.com. Looks like Troy Richards, Robert Fitzgerald. Looks like Rick, you placed an order. Thomas, thank you. Brian Rand. So we've sold some Raphie socks. What I did, and we didn't even discuss it, I priced these. Our standard sock is $14.99. We added $5. We want to give $5 back directly to Monster Bass Cares. So we got to make sure we're funding a great program that happens. And so we're going to give that $5 right off the top, right to Monster Bass Cares to make sure that money's going to a good place. You don't just get to have Raphie's face on your feet when you're fishing and all that good luck and mojo that comes with it. But we're going to be doing some good stuff. So thanks to those that have ordered. That's going to be awesome. And I'll take care of getting John his Raphie socks. We'll go out and make a Monster Bass video of the three of us fishing with Raphie. So it'll be cool.
Can't wait. Can't wait. Thanks for calling in, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks again, Shem.
Oh, thanks, man.
All right. I think we have one more. Oh, no.
Oh, trouble.
I don't know who it was.
We lost him.
I might have. Nope. I'm calling him right now. I'm not. I might have dropped the wrong person.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. It's Rick from Monster Bass. I hung up on you.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry.
Hey, I got hung up on there real quick, and I was kind of bumming out over here. I didn't think I was going to get through. Like your show ended.
Yeah, no.
Real quickly.
Go for it.
No, my name's Doc Holliday, and it's Shan. You said you live here in Central Florida?
Yeah, near Ocala, Fort McCoy, actually.
Okay. So I got a couple questions. I'm here in Palm Bay, Florida. I've been watching the show, listening to stuff. So, well, actually, one of the things is tomorrow's my birthday, and I plan on going fishing, so I hope I have a good day. It's good. You know, the weather here in Florida has been crazy.
Yeah, it has. Happy birthday.
Thanks. But my main question is about spraying. So many Headwaters is over here. I'm sure you've heard of it. But people spraying and everything else, and there's so much talk about people spraying on all of the lakes over here, and they're saying it's killing our fish and everything else, and so it comes and drops down to the bottom. I don't know everything about it, of course. It's taking away the oxygen, I guess, and it might be relieving some acids, and I don't know, like the bottom of our lakes and everything else over here now, it's all like mud and soot and everything, and I don't know if that's causing a problem with our fisheries over here. And then if I see them spraying an area and I see it where it's all dead, do I should I move, go to a different spot, or do I just try to fish that area?
Good question. So it depends on how you spray. Like I personally don't like, I've sprayed thousands of ponds, but I don't like doing it. I like to try to manage it without chemicals, right? They're expensive. They're not good for the environment. They're not good for me, you know, but unfortunately they're one of the tools that I have to use to do my job. They're inexpensive compared to like physically removing, like getting a team of guys to go out and pull it. That's wasting time usually. Sometimes grass carp won't control the plants that you have. They don't eat everything. So you have to treat that way. And sometimes you just need to get on top of it because it's about to kill the whole lake anyway. And getting rid of it as quickly as possible is important. So that being said, the sediment loading and stuff that you're describing is a natural process that kind of occurs. We went down that road, but didn't really. I think we got sidetracked on the aging process of lakes at the beginning of this. So let's revisit that. As water flows in, it brings small particles in there called sediment, and the sediment will fall out to the bottom, and over years creates that muddy bottom that then allows plants. It's because the sediment's full of nutrients and it's soft, so it allows a lot of areas for shallowing, and then a lot of areas for plants to grow. And then we start kind of going back down that conversation that we had about the grass carp before, where once you start getting too many weeds, your lake is going to die. And that's why they're treating it. The term is called, if you want to Google it, biological oxygen demand. So how it works is the plankton, when the sun comes up in the morning, the phytoplankton begins to use it, and it produces the oxygen that the fish breathe. So most of the oxygen, now the plants produce oxygen too, but not most of it. Most of it comes from the phytoplankton photosynthesis. Sorry. So at night, when you have a big plant population, because plants respire at night, the plankton uses the oxygen at night, and the plants use the oxygen at night. So when you start getting, and the fish, so when you start getting too many things alive in the pond at night, you can have an oxygen depletion. And it's usually in the summertime, because the warmer the water, just physics tells us the less oxygen is in it. So you can go out to a lake and get like 6.5 parts per million oxygen in the summer, go to the same lake in the winter and it'll be 14, just because it's colder. So the plant problems in Florida are crazy, man. I mean, I've dealt with aquatic weeds, but I've been living here about a year, and I mean, it is ridiculous the amount and variety of plants that are here. So these guys are challenged on so many different ways to try to keep the plants back, and there's so much water that there's no other way to do it but with herbicides. You can't get enough. An army of guys couldn't rake it all out. Grass carp aren't eating water lettuce and stuff like that. So unfortunately, you're kind of behind the 8 ball with the treatments. And I mean, I've been listening to the same arguments for 30 years. As a scientist, I can tell you the chemicals are designed for the water. The plants rot away pretty quickly. If you do it right, you won't create oxygen depletions with treatments, but if you do it wrong, you certainly will. There's an entire science and a job to treating the lake the right way and not killing the fish. But once you've gotten to that point, your fish are going to die anyway if you don't do it. So you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't with the treatments.
We've understood that. A lot of us said that around here, and I understand that they got to do it just to control it and everything else, because then we wouldn't even be able to get through it with our boats, actually, is another reason, I'm sure of it, But I've heard other farmers, because there's a lot of farmland around all of these swamps now that we have, that they say, why can't we just take dredge it out of there and put it up on the farmland and feed it to the cows and stuff like that, the cattle and stuff. But I'm sure it costs a lot, but they kill a lot of grass. I mean, they are spraying a ton of it, not just a little, it's a lot.
Oh, I know. And believe me, they wouldn't be doing it if they didn't have to. It's the government. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. And again, look at it this way. Say they quit, and then all the fish are dead, and you go out there fishing, and you never catch anything again because they quit spraying. Now where are you at? And I've seen that happen, by the way. That's not a hypothetical situation. I've run into places where people are like, absolutely not. You're not using herbicides here. And I'm like, well, I'm really sorry, but I can't help you. That's the only way you're going to fix that. Well, we're just going to leave it. Okay. Well, 6 months later, August, oh my God, all our fish are dead. Yeah, no joke.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to tell you, Shan,
I understand it. I kind of figured that.
I was going to pop back in. It's your birthday tomorrow. So like Shan, taking that information that he's given you, get away from those dead zones when you're talking about finding a lake. And I think that's really important. We talk about fishing and finding the spot where the fish live. We look for grass. We look for areas where there is an oxygen. I mean, you got these tools and things, grass lines where small fish are, whatever. If you find a big dead zone where they've sprayed and those chemicals have settled and there's particulates on purpose to carry like heavy metals, that'll bring those chemicals down to kill that grass, I'd recommend getting out of there and go find a healthier spot in the lake. And that's where you're going to find those fish. So birthday wishes for you. Happy birthday. And I definitely go find a good, healthy spot in the lake, catch some fish and have an awesome day out there.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks. I appreciate that, Chris.
All right, let's spin the wheel and get you a birthday present.
All righty. They're also fishing down here at Headwaters, and I hear a bunch of them. They're complaining, saying because our fish are skinny, and Headwaters is catch and release. It's a huge place now. And so shiner fishing, the commercial guys are coming in there shiner fishing, and they're blaming it on them, saying that they're depleting it from all the shiners. But from listening to you earlier, You're talking like it needs to have more bluegill. The shiner would probably hurt them.
Well, that's lake management versus pond management. So we've kind of moved the goalpost a little bit there. But again, Headwaters isn't old enough to have had a change in habitat. Okay, you've got to, just like I said, you've got a change in fish population. Catch and release only is creating the skinny bass.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right,
You want more bluegill? Here's another way to look at it. You want more bluegill or more shiner or more shad or more anything in the lake? Harvest 1 pound bass. For every 1 pound bass you take out, that's 10 pounds of forage they didn't eat that year. You just stocked your lake for free.
Oh. Okay. Good to know. Wish you'd be on there some more.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're gonna make a $25 donation to Monster Bass Cares in your name. So thank you very much.
Awesome. That's a good birthday present. That's cool.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks.
All
Looking
right.
forward to getting my box here, hopefully in a day or two.
All right. Happy birthday, man. Thank you.
Thanks again, gentlemen. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right. We did it.
We crushed it.
That was
That's it. It was an hour and a half already.
Hour and 40. Like I'm telling you, Shan, your information, I'm just going to say thank you. I'm not even going to say anything else. It's been amazing. It's fun to get to know you on a personal level, to chat with you. The information you've gathered from a life of fishing and the science, you pair it together, you explain it well where we can all consume it. We're better anglers because of it. So, bottom of my heart, thank you. This is the quest for all of us to have something outdoors that we get to enjoy, share, teach. It's incredible. So keep doing what you're doing. I'll keep measuring my fish and keeping my feelings out of it. And it's awesome.
Yep.
I mean, it helps the fisheries. I want the next generation to have the same access, and we got to start doing our part. And so getting rid of some of that misinformation, it's key. And doing something on purpose with scientific information is very important. So we can have the world be a better place, one fish at a time. So thanks again for being on.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Shan. You're the man.
I appreciate it, guys. I really do.
All right. Thank you.
What a guy. I tell you, too smart, right? It's so much information. He crushes it.
Yeah, I could have just sat back. I mean, I did just sit back and listen to it all. I mean, just soaking it all in. I mean, it's a wealth of knowledge, and it really makes you think about the pond a lot differently.
Yeah, he guides. It's fun because when he's given that information, you as a bait brand can really take the information and produce baits that will specifically help anglers catch fish. And he's helping the angler understand this life cycle and this food chain. He's helping all of us business wise, fishing wise. Like, what a cool resource to have in the fishing world. And the fact that he's so open to share the information to help all of us, like, that's pretty incredible. Pretty cool, dude.
Yeah, so good.
No, it's fun.
Yeah. So good.
Well, hey.
All right.
What do you say we do this again in a week or so? We got some Raphie socks. Raphie socks to make. We're gonna get these out. We'll start seeing hopefully Raphie's face out next to some fish. I think this will be fun to see what happens.
Listen, I got to see Raphie's face enough. I don't need to see him on my legs, but I bought a pair anyway, so we'll see.
I saw. All right, we'll see how it goes. I'll keep you posted. Well, thanks for having me. I mean, it's always fun to be here to learn. I tell you, Shan took me down this road of knowledge, and it's so fun to just learn and consume. And I think that's a neat part of having a podcast is people to log in, and we still got these eyes on this podcast listening to us for an hour and 40 minutes. It's such a better way to get information rather than just the 1 shot, 2 second social media. You get to dive in and listen to a person discuss things and explain things. And I just want to thank the listeners for being involved, because I think they've gained something tonight. And I think it's a neat thing to be a part of.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. For sure. And who's our guest next week?
So John Vano, he's got the Donkey Slayer. He's got a drop coming out. It's a bait. Think of a bladed jig. So we've got these baits that we know have been great search baits. His bladed jig is bigger and it's unique. He's got a we're talking 1 ounce tungsten head. It does 3/4 1 ounce, big, huge bladed jig, and perfect for monster bass trailers. We're going to talk something about that. I've been fishing with this thing. He's been working on this bait for like 7 or 8 years. He's won a ton of events down in the Delta. Tracy Bass guy that was down in the South Delta. We fish Windy Wednesdays, and he's got a wealth of knowledge, and he's going to discuss how to target bigger fish kind of goes right in perfect with the conversation we had. So it'll be fun to have John on. He's a local guy. Him and I connected about a year ago, and he's got a wealth of knowledge to share as well. So it's going to be fun talking about specific baits to catch some good fish.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a great show. And for everyone that's still here, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, you can catch us on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you do us a favor on the way out the door, maybe hit that like button or the thumbs up, whatever you want to call it. If you learned one thing today, that'd be great. And as always, we appreciate your time, and thanks for sticking with us. So we'll see you next week.